From now on, you either serve my wife like a proper mother-in-law, or you can leave. That's what my son, my Chad, said to me, standing in the middle of the kitchen I built from scratch with my husband, while his wife scrolled on her phone, smirking like it was some reality show finale. If you've ever been disrespected by someone you love, this story will speak to your heart. I didn't say a word. I looked down at the floor tiles I had scrubbed clean for years. One was chipped, a memory from when Chad knocked over his high chair in a tantrum. He was 3 then. I had picked him up, kissed his forehead and whispered, "You're safe here." But now I wasn't. Chad had moved back into this house a year ago, just until things got better. His wife, Tasha, never liked me, always called me old-fashioned, always rolled her eyes when I prayed before meals. I let them take the master bedroom. I gave up the only TV. I started cooking their favorite meals without being asked. It wasn't enough. Now he stood there, taller than I remembered, colder than I believed possible. "Did you hear me?" he said, his voice sharp. I looked up slowly. My lips didn't move, but something inside me cracked. Not loud, not visible, just a quiet fracture only I could feel. The next morning I stirred oatmeal in the same dented pot I used when Chad had chickenpox. I remembered holding him against my chest, feeling his feverish skin, whispering lullabies until he slept. Now I couldn't remember the last time he said thank you. The house was quiet. That eerie kind of quiet when people are home, but hearts are not. I heard Tasha upstairs, her heels clicking like a metronome of contempt. She always wore perfume too strong for breakfast. Chad followed her, laughing as if nothing had happened the night before. They didn't notice me setting their bowls on the table. They never did. Tasha sat, scrolled, and said, "Too thick. I told you I hate mushy oats." Chad didn't even look up. "Make something else then, Ma." I nodded, but my hands trembled. I turned back to the stove. On the fridge, faded with time, was a photo. Chad as a boy, dressed as a knight, sword made of cardboard, a crooked smile of missing teeth. I had made that costume. He had called me his queen. I kept my eyes on that picture as I cracked 2 eggs into the pan. I wasn't his queen anymore. I wasn't even a guest in my own home. When I placed the eggs before them, Tasha pushed the plate slightly away with a manicured nail. "Do you even season, or just hope for the best?" She laughed. Chad laughed with her, and I swallowed my pride with my silence. That afternoon I escaped to my room, or what was left of it. It used to be the guest room meant for visiting relatives. Now it was where I folded into myself. A narrow bed, 1 lamp, and a dresser too low for my back. Inside the top drawer, hidden under my nightgowns, was something I hadn't touched in years. A small velvet pouch. I opened it slowly as if it could break from the light. Inside was my mother's necklace, simple. A silver chain with a locket shaped like a teardrop. She gave it to me the day Chad was born. "You're a mother now," she'd whispered, pressing it into my palm. "That means you'll give everything and often get nothing back, but you'll still give." I hadn't worn it since John, my husband, passed. It felt too heavy then. Not on my neck, on my heart. Now it felt like the only thing in this house that still belonged to me. I pressed the locket to my lips. Downstairs I heard laughter. Tasha's voice, loud, sharp, full of power. Chad's footsteps following her like a shadow that forgot where it came from. I held the necklace tighter, not for the beauty of it, but because it still held the scent of someone who once believed I mattered. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps. "Ma," Chad said, "Tasha says you need to iron her dress for the gala tonight, can you?" He didn't wait for an answer. The dress was red, not the kind that whispers elegance, but the kind that screams for eyes. Tasha laid it across the couch like a queen presenting silk to her handmaid. "Don't burn it," she said, walking off without looking back. I stared at the fabric, expensive and empty. The tag was still on. $980. I thought about how many grocery bags that would have filled. How many weeks of dinners, of little treats I used to sneak into Chad's lunchbox, back when love was still noticed. I plugged in the iron, waited. Steam rose slowly like breath on a winter day. Every wrinkle I pressed out reminded me of something I had let slide, a forgotten birthday call, a missed thank you, a quiet insult I swallowed with dinner. I tried not to think, but memory doesn't wait for permission. I remembered the last gala I went to. John was still alive. We danced in the church hall under plastic stars. I wore a blue dress I'd sewn myself. Chad was 6, clapping for us with a juice box in his hand. I blinked back the sting. The iron hissed. When I finished, I hung the dress on the door carefully, not out of kindness, out of habit. Finally, Tasha said, taking it. She didn't thank me. Chad walked past with cologne thick in the air. "We'll be late. Order yourself something if you're hungry." No goodbye, no glance, just perfume, footsteps, and the silence they left behind. That night, the house echoed with absence. I reheated the stew I'd made 2 days ago. Potatoes gone soft, beef dry at the edges. I ate alone at the corner of the table, the same table where we used to have Sunday dinners, where Chad used to reach for second helpings with both hands and say, "Ma, you make the best food in the world." Now the only thing reaching was silence. The light above the table flickered. I'd asked Chad to fix it weeks ago. He said he'd get to it. He never did. I chewed slowly, listening for the sounds that weren't there. No laughter, no clinking plates, no family. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking wall clock John had hung up 20 years ago. Still working, unlike the man who hung it. When I finished eating, I washed the dishes. Their plates were still in the sink from breakfast. Egg dried on porcelain like a stain that didn't want to leave. I washed theirs too. Out of instinct, out of love maybe. Or maybe because I was afraid that if I stopped doing these things, I'd stop being needed at all. Later, I sat on the couch with the locket in my hand. The house was too clean, too cold. At 11:43 p.m., I heard the key in the lock. They came in laughing, drunk on wine and each other. Tasha's voice floated in. "She's still up. What does she do all day? Nap and mope." Chad didn't defend me. He never did. The next morning, I woke before the sun. Habit mostly. My body still followed rhythms no one else noticed. The time John used to leave for work. The hour Chad needed his school lunch packed. Now no one needed anything from me except silence. I made coffee. Not for them, for myself. Black, bitter, strong. It burned a little going down. I liked that. It reminded me I still felt something. When I stepped outside to get the newspaper, I noticed their car was gone. They'd left early. No note, no message, no sound. Just the garbage bin tipped over at the curb, split open like a wound. A trail of tissues and old food scraps led up the driveway like a trail of carelessness. I cleaned it without a word. By noon, the house was still empty. They had gone to the city. Tasha's cousin had a baby shower, one I wasn't invited to. She said I wouldn't get along with her side of the family. She said it with a smile that sliced deeper than shouting. I spent the day folding laundry, watering the plants that no longer bloomed, and fixing a button on Chad's dress shirt. I didn't know why I still did these things. Maybe because somewhere inside, I was still the mother who waited for a smile. I found an old birthday card in the laundry basket, one I'd given Chad when he turned 15. He'd kept it once. The corner was torn, the message faded, forgotten like me. It was nearly dusk when they came back, arms full of shopping bags, voices full of wine and gossip. Tasha's heels clacked across the hardwood as she dropped her bags on the couch I used to knit on. Can you believe Lisa gave everyone scented candles as favors? So basic. Chad laughed. That laugh I used to love hearing when he was little. Now it didn't reach me. It bounced around the walls like something hollow. I stayed in the kitchen, wiping down an already clean counter. I had made soup, soft and warm, chicken and rice, the kind Chad liked when he was sick. But no one asked what was for dinner. No one came. Instead, I heard them behind the half-closed door. "She's always hovering," Tasha whispered, "like some sad ghost." "She's trying," Chad muttered. "Just let her be." "No, it's weird. She listens to everything. I feel like I can't breathe in my own house." My house, I thought, but I didn't move, didn't speak. My fingers pressed harder into the cloth, scrubbing a spot that wasn't there. "She needs to go, Chad," Tasha said, her voice slicing through the silence. "I'm tired of playing nice." A pause, then Chad's voice, lower. "Maybe I'll talk to her." That moment held me like ice. Not because of what they said, but because I realized they weren't just angry. They were planning. And I was no longer a mother in their eyes, just an obstacle. The next evening, they sat down for dinner without calling my name. I had made roasted chicken. The smell filled the whole house, thyme and butter warming the air like an old memory trying to comfort me. I served their plates quietly. I didn't sit with them, not at first. But when Chad gestured vaguely to the chair at the far corner, not beside them, not across from them, but away, I understood. They wanted me there, yet not with them. Present, but invisible. So I sat where he pointed. My chair wobbled slightly, one leg shorter than the others. I had meant to fix it for months. Funny how we always repair furniture before we repair relationships. Tasha cut into the chicken and nodded. "It's fine," she said, as if granting approval. "A little dry, but fine." Chad ate in silence. I watched them, the way they leaned into each other, whispering, sharing looks I wasn't part of. I had once dreamed of gatherings when my son married, a full table, laughter, children running around, calling me grandma. Instead, I felt like an unpaid maid allowed a seat only to keep up the illusion of family. Halfway through the meal, Tasha excused herself to take a call. Chad followed her to the hallway. Their voices drifted back, muffled, but not enough. "She's becoming a burden," Tasha said. "This is our life. She's ruining it." A long pause. Chad's sigh, and then the words that stung more than I expected. "I know. I didn't finish my food, not because I wasn't hungry, but because swallowing felt like betrayal of myself." Later that night, I stood at the sink washing the dishes. The warm water fogged the window in front of me, blurring the dark outside. My hands moved on their own. Scrub, rinse, dry, motions so practiced they no longer needed thought. I heard Tasha in the living room, her voice bright with fake sweetness. "Chad, when we have kids, I don't want them raised with all that old school nonsense. No praying before meals, no respect your elders stuff. It's outdated." My hand slipped and a glass slipped from my fingers. It hit the sink and cracked clean down the middle. Not shattered, just broken enough to never hold water again. I picked it up carefully. The edge sliced my thumb. A thin line of red appeared, quiet, almost polite in the way it bled. I didn't gasp. I didn't call for help. I just watched it, the sting grounding me more than any word spoken in this house lately. I wrapped my finger in a paper towel, pressing to stop the bleeding. In the hallway, Chad murmured, "She means well. She just doesn't fit with how we live." Fit. As if I were a shoe they'd outgrown. I placed the cracked glass in the trash, but the other half, the curved piece that still could hold a few drops, I set aside on the counter. Something about it felt familiar. Not whole, yet not gone. As I turned off the kitchen light, Chad and Tasha laughed at something on the TV. I stood there a moment, invisible in the doorway. The house felt smaller than ever, and I felt myself shrinking to match it. 2 days later, a white envelope arrived in the mail, addressed in gold lettering, "Mr. and Mrs. Chad Allen." I placed it on the entry table where they'd be sure to see it. When Chad came home, Tasha snatched it first, tearing it open with excitement. "It's from the Wellingtons," she squealed. "Their anniversary dinner. Very exclusive, very formal. Only 30 guests." Chad whistled softly. "Big deal, huh?" "The biggest. Politicians, donors, business owners. We have to go." I stood nearby, folding a dish towel. I didn't expect to be invited with them, but I hoped, childishly, that Tasha might glance my way, include me in the conversation, ask for my opinion on what she should wear. Something. Instead, she said, "We'll need to book a hotel for the night. It's an adults-only event. No extra guests. Definitely not the place for older family." Older family. Not your mother. Not Nancy. Just older family. She clipped the invitation to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a crown. Fitting, I thought. She always wanted to feel royal in a house she never built. That evening, while they discussed outfits and connections they could make at the dinner, I sat in the armchair with a quiet smile, pretending to read. The words on the page swam. I wasn't really seeing them. A small, foolish part of me had imagined myself sitting at that table, wearing my navy dress, with Chad proudly introducing me as his mother. But as their laughter filled the room, laughter that closed me out, I realized they didn't just forget me. They preferred life without me in it. The day of the Wellington dinner arrived on a date I knew by heart, my birthday. Not a milestone, nothing grand, but still, a day that once mattered. I didn't mention it at breakfast. I waited to see if either of them would remember on their own. Sometimes silence reveals more than asking ever could. Tasha sat at the table in a robe, scrolling through her phone. "We'll leave by 4. I booked a blowout at noon, nails at 2. Don't disturb me." Chad rushed through cereal, tie draped around his neck, already half gone in his mind. "Ma, can you drop off my suit at the dry cleaner? They messed up the last time. Make sure they redo it for free." He kissed the top of my head, a quick peck that felt more like habit than affection, and left. Not one word. Not even a morning, Ma, let alone happy birthday. After they left, the house sat in an echoing hush. I baked a small vanilla cake, the kind Chad liked when he was little, with strawberry frosting. I didn't know why. Maybe to feel like I still had someone to bake for. At 7:10 p.m., I lit a single candle. I didn't sing. I didn't make a wish. I just watched the flame wobble, fighting to stay alive in the draft of the empty kitchen. Their laughter returned just after midnight. Tipsy, carefree, wrapped in perfume and success. They didn't notice the cake on the table. They didn't notice the burned-down candle. They walked right past me. And for the first time in my life, I wondered if a birthday forgotten by everyone else still counted. The next morning, I woke early, though I hadn't slept much. The candle from my birthday still sat on the table, wax hardened, leaning to one side like a tired spine. I picked it up and held it a moment before dropping it gently into the sink. As the water ran over it, the flame mark disappeared, washed away as if the night had never happened, just like the day itself. I made breakfast quietly, scrambled eggs, toast, sliced fruit, out of habit, not hope. Tasha came down first, rubbing her temples dramatically. "Ugh, I need coffee. Strong. And can you not bang things around this morning? I have a headache." Chad followed, humming, his mood too light to notice mine. "Last night was amazing. Everyone loved Tash. We might get invited to the Wellingtons Lake House next month." He sat, scrolling through his phone. No eye contact, no warmth, no trace of the little boy who once saved his allowance to buy me daffodils for Mother's Day. As I poured coffee into their mugs, Tasha wrinkled her nose. "Did you clean this pot? It tastes old." It wasn't the coffee she meant, it was me. Chad grabbed his briefcase. "Ma, we'll be home late. Can you wash Tasha's dress from last night? And don't shrink it, it was expensive." They rushed out the door with the energy of people running toward a life they didn't want me in. I stood in the doorway after they left, house quiet again, holding that empty coffee pot. I realized something then. You don't need to be thrown out to no longer belong. Sometimes the door stays closed around you even while you're still inside. Around mid-afternoon, as I hung laundry on the line in the backyard, I saw a familiar figure walking up the side gate. Slow, deliberate steps, like someone approaching sacred ground. It was Helen, my neighbor for over 30 years. She had watched Chad grow up, had brought casseroles when John passed, had held my hands at the funeral when I couldn't stand without shaking. She smiled softly when our eyes met. I was passing by and thought I'd check on you. Haven't seen you at church lately. I swallowed, embarrassed by how much those simple words warmed me. Thank you for coming, Helen. I've been busy with the kids. She looked at the laundry. All of it theirs. Not a single piece of mine. Busy? She asked gently. Not judging, just seeing more than I said. We sat on the porch steps, the autumn air cool enough to raise a shiver on my arms. Helen placed a small paper bag beside me. I baked too many muffins. Thought you might like some. Inside were 6 lemon poppy muffins wrapped in a cloth embroidered with tiny sunflowers. Care, thought, effort. Things I hadn't felt directed at me in so long. We talked about ordinary things, the weather, her garden, a new family moving 2 houses down. But there was a silence beneath our words, a shared understanding she didn't force me to name. Before she left, Helen touched my arm lightly. If you ever need a place to breathe, my door is open. You don't have to carry everything alone, Nancy. After she stepped away, I stayed there a while, holding one warm muffin in my hands. The first warmth that felt like love in a long time. The wind picked up, rustling the laundry, Chad's shirts, Tasha's dresses. And for the first time, I wondered how life would feel if none of it were hanging on my line. As evening settled, I sat at the small desk in my room, the one squeezed between the bed and the dresser so tightly I had to turn sideways to sit. I pulled out a set of thank you cards I used to send after church events. I hadn't used them in years. I took one, uncapped my pen, and stared at the blank space. I began writing a letter. Not a thank you card, but a letter I never meant to send. My dear Chad, I don't know when I became invisible to you. The words came slowly, unevenly, like a heart relearning how to beat. I wrote about the first time he called me Mommy, the way he used to run into my arms after school, how he once told me he'd build me a house beside his so I'd never be alone. Then my handwriting faltered. I didn't write about now, not yet. Instead, I wrote the truth he had forgotten. I have loved you every day of your life, even on the days you don't notice. A tear fell onto the page and blurred the ink. I pressed my palm over it as if I could erase the stain, or the feeling. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. I quickly folded the letter and slipped it inside a book, A Mother's Garden, a gift Chad gave me when he was 12. On the inside cover he had written, "To Mom who grows everything with love." I touched those childish letters with my fingertips. Tasha's voice floated from the living room, sharp as ever. "Chad, your mother needs to stop hoarding old junk. It's depressing." I closed the book. Not junk, memories. And they were the only things in this house I still owned. It was supposed to be a normal Tuesday. I roasted chicken thighs with rosemary and lemon, the same recipe John had loved. I set the table, lit a small candle for no reason other than to make things feel human. At 7:05, Chad and Tasha walked in, arms full of shopping bags, chattering about some new lounge that had just opened downtown. Tasha took one look at the table and sighed. "Again? We're trying to eat cleaner, Nancy. Less oil, less fat, less whatever this is." She poked the chicken like it had insulted her. Chad barely looked up from his phone. "We'll order something later. Thanks though, Ma." And just like that, they disappeared into their room, the door clicking shut like a final verdict. I stood alone by the table, candle flickering. The scent of rosemary filled the room, a scent once connected to laughter, to family, to warmth. Now it clung to the walls like something unwanted. I sat anyway. I ate one thigh, slowly, and then another. Not because I was hungry, but because throwing it away felt like throwing myself away too. Every bite tasted like effort that had nowhere to go. When I cleared the table, I left their plates untouched. The chicken cooled into silence. Later, I heard Tasha laugh from the bedroom, a loud, satisfied sound. Then Chad's voice, not cruel, just empty. She's used to being alone. It's what she does. That was the moment. Not a scream, not a slap, just that sentence. She's used to being alone. He wasn't wrong, but that didn't make it hurt less. 2 days later, I went out to water the front flowers, or what was left of them. The marigolds had wilted, the soil cracked. Like me, they had once bloomed with purpose. Now, they clung to habit more than life. When I came back, the front door didn't open. I jiggled the handle, turned the knob again. Nothing. The door had been sticking lately, especially when it rained. I'd told Chad twice. He said, "I'll get to it." I knocked lightly, then louder. Nothing. I walked around back, hoping the patio door was unlocked. It wasn't. My keys were inside. My phone too. Just me, my cardigan, and the sound of traffic in the distance. I sat on the porch, waiting. 1 hour. 2. The sun began to dip. At 6:17 they returned. Tasha stepped out of the car first, sunglasses still on, drink in hand. Chad trailed behind, typing into his phone. When they saw me sitting there, Chad frowned. "What are you doing out here?" "The door stuck again," I said gently. I was watering the flowers, and it locked behind me. Tasha rolled her eyes. "Well, maybe next time take your phone, or don't go out if you can't get back in." She brushed past me, as if I were a misplaced package on the porch. Chad followed, muttering, "It's just a door, Ma. No need to act like it's the end of the world." But it wasn't just a door. It was the line between being part of this house and being locked out of everything that used to be mine. The following afternoon, I was dusting the mantel, not because anyone asked me to, but because the silence needed something to do. There was a vase there, porcelain, blue and white, with a crack near the rim. Chad had given it to me on his first Mother's Day after college. He said it reminded him of me, delicate but strong. I remembered how my heart swelled when he said that. I remember believing it. As I moved the cloth gently around it, my elbow bumped a photo frame. The frame nudged the vase. The vase tipped. It fell with the softest sound. Not a crash, not a shatter, but a sad final thud that told me it was over. I froze. It had broken in 2 clean pieces, like something that gave up rather than fought to stay whole. Tasha came in just as I was gathering the shards. "What happened?" "I dropped the vase," I whispered. "I'm sorry." She stepped over the pieces like they were leaves. "Well, that's one less thing cluttering the room." I stared at her, my fingers still curled around the broken halves. Chad walked in moments later. She turned to him casually. "Your mom broke that vase you gave her." He looked up from his phone. "It's fine. Wasn't that expensive anyway." He didn't even look at me. Didn't ask if I was cut or if I was okay. I took the pieces to my room, washed them gently, and placed them in a shoebox beneath the bed. Because even things that break still deserve a place to rest. That night I couldn't sleep. The house creaked in places it never used to. Or maybe I had just stopped ignoring it. I sat at the edge of my narrow bed and reached for the velvet pouch in the drawer. The locket. I hadn't worn it in years, but tonight I clasped it around my neck with trembling hands. It hung heavy against my chest, not in weight, but in memory. I opened it. On one side, a photo of baby Chad, pink-cheeked and toothless, wrapped in the same blue blanket I had stitched during my pregnancy. On the other side, a tiny clipping of John's handwriting. Just one word. Always. I stared at that word until my vision blurred. I had held this family together for decades, with casseroles and night prayers, with scraped knees and whispered songs, with forgiveness I never asked to be thanked for. And now I was invisible in the home I'd built from foundation to flower pots. Suddenly I heard voices through the wall, Chad and Tasha, quiet but tense. She doesn't do anything, Chad. She's always just around, like a shadow that makes the room feel smaller. She raised me, Tash. Yeah? Then maybe it's time she let go. Silence. Then Chad's sigh. She'll be fine. She always is. I pressed the locket flat against my heart, because for once, I wasn't sure that was true. The invitation arrived on a Thursday. Not for me, of course. It was Tasha's 35th birthday. A big dinner, private venue, dress code, elegant black. Gold foil letters shimmered on the thick card like they were proud of their purpose, to celebrate her, to show the world she mattered. I didn't ask if I was invited. I just ironed Chad's shirt and steamed her dress without being told. On the night of the party, I watched from the hallway as Tasha stepped into the mirror in her fitted gown, adjusting her earrings. "You think your mother will be okay alone?" she asked without turning. Chad shrugged. "She's fine. She likes quiet." They left without saying goodbye. I stood there in my soft blue sweater, hair pinned back, a tray of lemon bars cooling in the kitchen. My small gesture, in case they wanted something sweet when they returned. At 9 p.m., I sat in the darkened living room with the television on low. I wasn't watching. I was listening for the key in the lock, for footsteps, for some proof that I hadn't been completely left behind. They returned at midnight, drunk on attention and champagne. I stayed seated. Tasha's laughter pierced the hallway. "Did you see Marlene's face when Chad toasted me? Like she couldn't believe he married me." Chad's voice was lower. "You were perfect," she giggled. "Even your mother couldn't have ruined tonight." He didn't correct her, didn't say my name, didn't mention I existed. And that hurt more than any insult ever could. The next morning I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror for a long time. Not at my clothes, not at my hair, at my face, at the lines time had carved. Some from laughter, most from sacrifice. The faint sunspot on my left cheek, the small scar near my temple from when Chad was 6 and swung a bat too close to me in the backyard. I used to look like someone's mother, someone's wife, someone with a place. Now I just looked tired. I pressed a damp towel to my cheeks, then reached for the lipstick I hadn't touched in years. Soft rose, nearly dried up. I applied it anyway, a quiet rebellion. A reminder that I still knew how to care for something, even if it was just myself. Downstairs, I found a note on the fridge. "Gone to Tasha's parents' lake house. Back Sunday. See. No mom, no thank you, no do you need anything. Just an absence, signed with a single letter." I stood in the kitchen for a moment, then made tea. Sat at the table alone. No clinking forks, no pass the sugar, no voice to fill the quiet. And still, I set out 3 mugs without thinking. Old habits are stubborn like that. I looked down at the 3rd cup, untouched, cooling slowly in the morning light. Then I looked at the locket on my chest, warm from my skin. I whispered aloud just once, "I'm still here." No one heard me, but I needed to say it, even if it was only to myself. By Saturday evening, the silence had thickened. I moved slowly through the house, dusting, folding, tidying, the motions of someone trying to stay necessary. In the hallway closet, I reached for a spare towel and instead knocked over an old suitcase. It hit the floor with a soft thud, its zipper half open. I stared at it. It wasn't theirs. It was mine. The one I used when John and I took road trips, before hospitals, before funerals, before the grief etched itself into my spine. I knelt down and opened it fully. Inside were things I'd forgotten I'd packed away. A shawl John bought me in Asheville, a Bible with notes scribbled in the margins, a photograph of Chad at age 10, missing a tooth, holding up a trophy with one sock falling down. I touched the photo, tracing his smile. That child would never have said the things this man now says. That child never would have let me sleep in a room too small for my soul. I sat back against the wall, suitcase open beside me, my breath shallow. What would it mean to pack it again? Not just clothes, not belongings, but the realization that maybe I deserved to be more than tolerated. That I didn't have to stay just because leaving would hurt, because staying was hurting too. I didn't make a decision that night, but I left the suitcase open, and somehow that felt like the beginning of something. They returned Sunday evening, laughter, perfume, a breeze of lake air clinging to their clothes. I was in the kitchen rinsing lentils, not cooking for them, just for me. Tasha dropped her bag at the door like the house owed her space. "Ugh, I need a shower. That drive was brutal." Chad followed, flipping through his phone. "Ma, we need to talk later, okay?" He said it casually, but something in his voice tightened my chest. I nodded, not trusting my voice. They disappeared into their room. I heard music, the sound of water running, a suitcase unzipping carelessly. I finished my lentils, poured them into a pot with bay leaf and onion. The smell rose slowly, earthy, familiar, comforting in a way nothing else had been lately. Later at dinner time, I didn't call them. I sat one place, just one. I ate in peace. No comments, no criticism, just the rhythm of my own chewing, the warmth of something I'd made for myself. At 9 p.m., Chad came to the doorway. He leaned against it like a man too nervous to sit. "Hey, Tasha and I have been talking." I looked up. He didn't meet my eyes. "We think it might be time for you to take a little break. Maybe stay with Aunt Ruth for a while. You'd have more space, quiet, less stress." I stared at him. He meant leave. He meant go away. He meant we want our life without you in it. I didn't answer. I just stood and walked past him without a word. Because if he couldn't say the truth out loud, I didn't owe him a response. The next evening, the words he hadn't said finally came out. I was folding laundry in the living room, their clothes, not mine, when Chad turned off the TV and cleared his throat. Tasha sat beside him, arms crossed, chin lifted like a judge ready to deliver a sentence. "Nancy," she began, using my name instead of Mom. A warning in itself. "We need a more balanced living arrangement." Chad shifted uncomfortably. "What Tash means is things would be easier if you helped out more. Contributed." I paused, a soft towel in my hands. "I cook, clean, do laundry, care for the house." Tasha cut me off with a laugh sharp enough to slice through the air. "That's just basic stuff. We mean real support, emotional support. Be useful." Useful. I'd spent my whole life being useful. Chad stood, pacing a little. "Look, Ma, if you want to stay here, things have to change. You can't just exist. You need to help Tasha more, serve her, make her life easier." The towel slipped from my hands. Serve her. Not love, not help, not share a home with us. Serve. My own son, the baby I once rocked through fevers, now looked at me as if I were an employee failing to meet expectations. I felt my heart beat in my throat. "And if I don't?" Tasha leaned back, smiled like victory tasted sweet. "Then maybe this isn't the right place for you anymore." There it was. No pretending, no cushioning. The choice was humiliation or homelessness. Something inside me, something quiet, something old, sat down within my ribs and whispered, "Not this time." After their ultimatum, I went to my room expecting tears. The kind that soaked the pillow, the kind that wring the heart dry, but none came. Instead, I sat on the edge of my bed, hands resting on my knees, feeling a stillness I hadn't known in months. The house hummed faintly with the sounds of their life. A TV show, the clink of wine glasses, muffled laughter. It no longer pierced me. On the dresser, the velvet pouch lay open. The locket gleamed softly under the bedside lamp. I touched it, not for comfort, but for clarity. I thought of John, of the promise in his handwriting. Always. Always did not mean at any cost. Always did not mean even when they crush you. Always meant honor yourself too. I stood and opened the window a crack. The cold night air brushed my face. For the first time, I let myself imagine a life that wasn't contained between these walls. A life where I could breathe. I pulled the suitcase from the closet, not to pack, not yet, but to place it by the door of my room. A quiet declaration. Down the hall, Tasha laughed loudly at something Chad said. It echoed through the house, but it didn't reach me. I lay down and looked at the ceiling, and for the first night since they moved in, I fell asleep without a tear. Sometimes the heart stops breaking, not because it healed, but because something stronger begins to grow in the space where pain once lived. The morning light crept across the floor, soft and golden. I rose early, before them as always, and brewed coffee just for myself. No extra mugs this time. I sat at the kitchen table, the steam rising like a small blessing, and reached into my cardigan pocket. The letter I had written weeks ago, the one I never sent, was still folded neatly, the paper creased at the corners from being carried too long without release. I opened it and read it aloud, quietly. Not for them. For me. My dear Chad, I don't know when I became invisible to you. My voice trembled at first, but steadied as I read. I told him how I loved him, how I still did, how every meal, every stitch of clothing, every quiet act was love wrapped in silence. I told him how it felt to be erased in the house I built with his father. I told him I remembered every scraped knee, every whispered secret, every time he cried in my arms and said, "Don't ever leave me, Mom." When I finished, I folded the letter again, slipped it into a new envelope, wrote his name on the front with my best handwriting, and left it on his pillow. Not as a plea, not as a guilt trip, as truth. Undeniable, undeletable. I didn't know if he would read it, but I needed it to be there, because sometimes the only way to break a silence is to place a truth exactly where it can no longer be ignored. It happened the next morning, unexpected, like a wind that changes the whole shape of a tree. I was in the garden, pruning the dead marigolds, when the landline rang inside. I let it ring once, twice. Then I wiped my hands and went in. "Nancy Allen," a calm, professional voice said. "This is Mark Hill. I was your late husband's estate lawyer." My heart stopped for just a moment. "Yes, this is she. I've been reviewing some older documents we found during a recent records consolidation. It appears John left a secondary will, dated shortly before his passing. We hadn't located it earlier. It was handwritten and stored in a private safety box under his name only." I gripped the edge of the counter. "I don't understand. There are changes in the document you need to be aware of," he said gently. "I'd prefer to explain them in person." "Would you be available to come to the office this week?" I barely managed to respond. "Yes, of course." After I hung up, I stood still for a long time. John. He had left something separate, something they didn't know about. I went to the bedroom, opened the velvet pouch, and held the locket tight in my hand. Always. That one word burned brighter now, because maybe, just maybe he had known, had seen what could happen, had tried to protect me from the shadows that would come. I looked at the suitcase near the door. For the first time, it didn't feel like an end. It felt like the beginning of a return. Not to a house, but to myself. 2 days later, I stepped into the lawyer's office. Quiet, lined with books and time. Mr. Hill, a man with kind eyes and slow words, greeted me like someone who understood loss without needing to ask about it. He pulled a folder from a drawer, placed it on the desk between us, and opened it with care. "This was written in your husband's handwriting," he said, turning the paper so I could read it. John's writing, slanted, steady, full of the same gravity he had carried in life. In the event of my death, the house at 413 Maple Lane belongs solely to my wife, Nancy Allen. This is her home. No one else has earned it. No one else has the right to take it from her. I read the words twice, 3 times. A pressure I hadn't even known was crushing me began to lift, piece by heavy piece. Mr. Hill continued, legally, it overrides any claims made by cohabiting family, including your son and daughter-in-law. The deed will be updated, it's yours, fully and permanently. I couldn't speak, not yet. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the paper. The locket around my neck felt warm, like a whisper against my skin. Outside, leaves stirred in the breeze. Inside, something long silent within me, my right to belong, my right to stand tall, began to rise again. I left the office with the envelope pressed to my chest. He gave me back my house. But more than that, he gave me back my name. That evening, I waited in the living room, calm and ready. I had prepared tea, just 2 cups, not out of habit, but as a choice. Chad and Tasha came in around 7, arms full of shopping bags and chatter. Their laughter faded the moment they saw me sitting there, hands folded, the envelope on the table before me. Tasha raised an eyebrow. Everything okay? Yes, I said simply, motioning to the chair across from me. Sit, both of you. Chad looked confused, a flicker of the boy I once knew passing across his face. They sat. I slid the envelope toward them. This is from your father's lawyer, I said. A handwritten will, found recently. It changes everything. Tasha opened it first, her eyes scanning quickly. Her expression shifted, confidence curdling into disbelief. Chad leaned over, reading slower than her. He swallowed. This says, the house belongs to you, he said, voice quiet. It always did, I replied. But now it's official, legal and permanent. Tasha's tone sharpened. That's not fair. We've lived here, You've stayed here, I interrupted, still calm. You've used what you didn't build, mocked what you didn't understand, disrespected what you never had to earn. Chad looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something flicker. Not guilt yet, but recognition. Tasha stood, flustered. So what? Are you kicking us out now? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I sipped my tea. I'm saying the house has a foundation again, one that won't bend for cruelty. I stood. You may stay, or you may go, but the days of me living like I don't exist, they ended tonight. The next morning I woke early, not from dread, but from something else entirely, peace. The kind that comes when the worst is already past, and the truth has settled into the walls. I made my tea slowly. The house felt different, lighter, as if it had exhaled overnight. When I came to the front hall, I stopped in my tracks. A suitcase sat at the foot of the stairs. Not mine, Tasha's. Designer, beige with gold zippers. Overpacked, angry. She was already dressed. Full makeup at 6:30 a.m., eyes sharp with indignation. I'm going to stay with my sister for a while, she said flatly. Maybe longer. I nodded. That's your choice. She hovered by the door. I'm not doing this because of some old piece of paper. I'm doing it because this house is poisoned. I looked at her, my voice steady. What poisoned it was the way I was treated, and the silence you counted on to make me disappear. She scoffed. You'll regret this. No, I said. I've regretted not standing up. But that ends here. Chad came downstairs, tie askew, rubbing his forehead. Tash, don't do this now. But she was already wheeling the suitcase out. I'll send someone for the rest, she said. The door closed behind her. Not with a slam, but a click. Quiet. Final. Chad stood in the hallway, eyes flicking between the door and me. You didn't have to make her feel unwelcome. I didn't, I said. She made herself feel uninvited when she forgot I was human. He didn't argue, because he knew I was right. That night the house was still. Chad sat alone at the table, untouched dinner in front of him. The silence between us had changed. No longer cold, but heavy with something he hadn't named yet. He stood abruptly and walked upstairs. I heard drawers open, a door creak, then nothing. 10 minutes later, he came back down, holding the book I'd kept tucked away, A Mother's Garden. He placed it gently on the table between us. I found this in your room. I nodded. He opened it slowly, revealing the letter, the one I'd written weeks ago, never mailed, never spoken. He didn't look up as he read, page after page. His fingers shook slightly. His lips pressed together to hold back something that had waited too long to surface. When he finished, he folded the letter and sat in silence. Then, barely a whisper, "I forgot who you were." My eyes welled, but I didn't let the tears fall. Not yet. "You didn't forget," I said quietly. "You just stopped looking." He bowed his head. "You were always there. And I treated you like furniture." I reached across the table and touched his hand, gently, like when he was small and scared of storms. "You still have time to be better. That's the gift of shame. It comes with a mirror." He nodded slowly. Outside, the wind shifted, and a soft creak echoed from the porch, the same sound John used to make when he came in from work. For the first time in years, I felt something return to the house. Acknowledgement, and maybe, just maybe, remorse. The next morning, Chad stood by the back door, sipping coffee, the one I'd made without being asked. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm wash over the yard. He glanced out at the overgrown flower bed and said quietly, "I didn't even know you still gardened." I didn't turn to look at him. "That's because you stopped asking what mattered to me." He flinched, but didn't walk away. We stepped outside together. The soil was soft from last night's rain. My gloves hung over the railing, a small trowel leaning where I left it. "These marigolds," I said, kneeling slowly. "I planted them when your father passed. They were his favorite, strong, stubborn blooms. They come back, even when winter tries to kill them." Chad crouched beside me, awkward in his pressed slacks. "I thought they were just weeds," he admitted. I smiled, not from amusement, but from the strange grace of honesty returning. A lot of beautiful things look like weeds when you're too busy looking past them. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Tasha didn't like flowers in the house. She said they were messy." "They are," I said, pulling a dead bloom from the soil. "So is grief. So is love." He picked up the trowel and began to dig clumsily beside me. We didn't speak for a while, just worked the earth, not because everything was healed, but because something broken had finally been acknowledged, and that is where real growth begins. That afternoon, while dusting the shelves in the hallway, I found a small wooden box I hadn't touched in years. John's cufflinks used to be inside, now long gone, given to Chad when he graduated. But beneath the velvet lining, hidden in a corner, was something I hadn't remembered putting there, a ring box. Inside it, the first ring John ever gave me, a delicate band, nothing fancy, just gold, thin and warm from all the years it spent circling my finger. I had stopped wearing it when the house grew cold after his passing. I held it in my palm for a long moment. It no longer fit quite right. My fingers thinner now, worn down by years and grief. Still, I slid it on. It rested there gently, not tight, not loose, just right enough. Later that evening, Chad walked past me in the hallway, then paused and looked down at my hand. His eyes softened. "I remember that ring," he said. "Dad gave it to you when I was 5. I used to think it had magic in it." I smiled. "It still does." He leaned against the wall, hesitant. "I want to start fixing things, Mom, but I don't really know how." "Start by remembering," I said softly. "Not who I was, but who you were when you knew how to see me." He nodded, eyes wet. "Not broken, just starting." And for the first time, I saw something in my son's face that had been missing for years. Humility. The next morning, I found Chad in the kitchen, alone, pouring coffee. No phone in his hand, no rush in his step. He turned as I entered and held something out. A photograph. Faded at the edges, its colors softened with time. It was the picture of him dressed as a knight, cardboard sword in hand, smiling up at me, the one that had once hung on the fridge before Tasha took it down to make space for cleaner aesthetics. "I found this in the back of my closet," he said. It was under an old pair of sneakers. I took it gently, my fingers brushing the image like a blessing. "You said I called you my queen that day," he added, eyes fixed on the photo. "You did," I whispered. "And you meant it." He walked to the fridge, pulled off a magnetic notepad, and carefully placed the photograph back where it once belonged. We stood side by side, staring at it. "It's strange," he said. "How something so small can make a home feel like it remembers again." I looked at him, really looked, and saw the boy who used to draw me with a crown and hearts all around. "You're not too late, Chad," I said. "It just takes truth to start again." He nodded. "I want to start again." That photo, just paper, ink, and time, now held something sacred once more. A reminder that recognition can be the first step toward redemption, and that even forgotten pictures can return to their rightful place. It was a week later when I heard a knock at the front door, a sound I hadn't heard in years. A knock, not a key turning, not someone barging in, a knock. I opened it to find Tasha, standing there, suitcase at her side, face unreadable. "I came to get the rest of my things," she said. I nodded and stepped aside. She entered like a stranger, not looking around, not speaking. She went straight upstairs while I remained in the kitchen, letting the kettle hum its low song. After a while, she came down, bags in hand, and stopped just before the door. "I didn't think you'd actually make him choose," she said flatly. "I didn't," I replied. "I made a choice for myself." She looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time, there was no contempt in her eyes, just something that resembled surprise, maybe even respect. "This house feels different now," she muttered. "It remembers who it belongs to," I said softly. Tasha stood there a beat too long. Then she opened the door. The same door I had once been afraid to walk through, the same door that had become a wall. She paused, turned back. "He's changing, you know." "I know," I whispered, and she left. The door closed behind her with a sound not of anger, but of completion. The same door that once made me feel unwelcome had now returned its power, not through rage, but through quiet, earned dignity. That evening I opened the door to the master bedroom. It still smelled faintly of her perfume, sharp, artificial, but the windows were open now, and the air moved freely. Chad stood in the corner folding sheets. "I want you to have this room back," he said. "It was always yours." I looked around. The walls, once filled with their noise, now stood quiet, waiting. The dresser John had built was still there, scuffed at the bottom drawer. My reading lamp, the lace curtain I had sewn in spring. "My things are still in the small room," I said gently, unsure. "They don't belong there," he replied. We moved together in silence, shifting hangers, folding linens. No big speeches, just motion, respect in the rhythm. Later I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress familiar, the view from the window unchanged since the day John and I moved in. Chad came to the doorway, hesitant. "Do you remember when I used to crawl in here after nightmares?" he asked, half smiling. I nodded. "You'd always let me stay, even when I was too old." "You were never too old to be held," I said. He blinked fast and looked down. "I think I stopped seeing you because I was afraid to see myself." I reached out and took his hand. "Then start seeing now." He squeezed my fingers. A son's touch, not a tenant's. And as he stepped away, I looked around the room again. It didn't just feel like mine. It felt like it could hold love again. The next day, I did something I hadn't done in months. I washed only my own clothes. No socks that weren't mine, no dresses I didn't choose. Just my own scent, my own fabric, my own rhythm. As the dryer hummed softly, I stood in the laundry room, folding a pale yellow cardigan. John used to say I looked like sunshine when I wore it. I had stopped wearing it after he died. It had felt too soft for grief. I laid it neatly on the basket, then reached for the towel with the frayed edge, the one Chad used to drag behind him like a cape when he pretended to be a superhero. I smiled, ran my fingers across the fabric, then folded it slowly. Chad came to the doorway. "Need help?" he asked. I raised an eyebrow. "With my own laundry?" He chuckled. "Fair enough." He leaned against the frame, watching me, not with guilt, not anymore, with something gentler. "Did you ever hate me?" he asked. I looked up steady. "No, but I forgot how to love myself while loving you." He nodded, quietly taking that in. "I want to be better," he said. "Then be consistent," I answered. "Not grand, just steady." He came forward and took the basket from me. "I can carry this." And he did. Up the stairs, slow, careful, like he finally understood that even the smallest burdens are sacred when they belong to someone who was once unseen. That Sunday, Chad offered to cook. I watched from the doorway as he fumbled with measuring spoons, reading a recipe on his phone. He chopped onions too big, oversalted the broth, burned the toast. But he tried, and that mattered more than the taste. He set the table himself, mismatched napkins, forks on the wrong side. He even lit a candle, the stubby one I used for quiet prayers when I thought no one was watching. We sat down, just the two of us. There was no speech, no dramatic apology, just the clink of spoons and the warmth of something home-cooked, even if imperfect. Halfway through the meal, he looked up and said, "I don't know how I let it get so far." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He continued, voice low. "You gave me everything, and I repaid you with silence." I reached across the table, resting my hand gently over his. "You're here now. That's what matters." He nodded, eyes wet. "Is it too late to earn my way back?" "It's never too late to come home," I said. He stood after dinner, cleared the plates without being asked, washed the dishes, dried every glass carefully like he was touching something sacred. That night, the house felt full, not of noise, but of presence, of truth. And as I sat in my chair by the window, sipping tea, I thought, justice doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it walks in quietly, wearing an apron and holding a dish towel. The next morning, I heard a sound I hadn't heard in months, the front door unlocking from the inside. Chad stood in the doorway, his jacket on, keys in hand. But he wasn't rushing like usual. He lingered. "I'm heading out," he said, hesitating. "Do you need anything?" I smiled. "No, thank you." He nodded, then opened the door, but didn't close it behind him. He left it ajar, just a crack, like an invitation. I stood at the top of the stairs, watching the light spill in from outside, warming the hardwood floor. A neighbor passed, waved. I waved back. I thought of all the doors in this house, ones that slammed, ones that locked me out, ones that once whispered, "You don't belong here anymore." But not today. Today, the door was open. Later, as I swept the porch, I saw something small resting on the welcome mat, a folded note. I picked it up. Inside, in Chad's handwriting, were just 3 words. "I see you." No explanation, no signature. But it was enough. I looked back at the house, at the kitchen where my meals had gone uneaten, at the hallway where I had once listened through walls, at the stairs where I had felt smaller with every step. And I exhaled. Because now, every room remembered me, not just as a mother, but as a woman who stood her ground and stayed. And now the house was finally mine again, not by law, by truth. That night, I lit the old lamp by the reading chair, the one John used to sit beside, the one that had stayed dark for too long. The soft amber glow filled the room like a hush after a storm. I pulled a blanket over my legs and opened A Mother's Garden. Not to the letter, but to the first page. Outside, wind brushed the windows, but inside it was calm. I could hear Chad moving upstairs. The sounds were gentle now, drawers opening, not slamming, footsteps that paused instead of storming past. He came down barefoot and stood in the doorway. "You're still up," he said. I nodded. I liked the quiet. It listens better than most people. He gave a soft smile. I was thinking, maybe we could plant something together next weekend. The marigolds need redoing. I looked up. I'd like that. He hesitated, then added, "We could ask Helen for those seeds she used to give us." He remembered. That was enough. He kissed the top of my head. Slow, deliberate, not rushed like before. And then he went back upstairs. I turned back to my book. The lamp hummed softly beside me. It didn't flicker. It didn't dim. It stayed on, warm, steady, patient, just like I had. And in that light, I found what I'd been missing all along. Not just respect, but peace. A week later, I stood barefoot in the backyard, hands deep in the soil. The marigolds had been replanted, rows of golden orange dancing in the soft wind. The same flowers John loved, the same ones Chad helped plant just days ago. Fumbling with the trowel, dirt under his nails like a boy again, he watched me now from the porch steps, quiet, content, not needing to fill the air with apologies, just present. The sun dipped low, painting everything in amber. I knelt and pressed one last seed into the earth, covered it gently, whispered a blessing, not out loud, but in the quiet way mothers do when they're finally alone and finally safe. Behind me, Chad called out, "Dinner's almost ready." I smiled. "I'll be in soon." I stayed just a moment longer. The house stood tall behind me, mine not because a paper said so, but because truth had finally rooted itself in its walls. No more whispered insults behind doors. No more birthday candles burned down in silence. Only peace and marigolds. I stood, wiped my hands on my apron, and looked at the flowers one last time. Then, as dusk wrapped around me like a soft shawl, I whispered to the wind, "Respect isn't inherited. It's earned day by day." I turned toward the house, and the door, the same door that once closed on me, now stood open with warm light pouring out. It no longer shut me out. It welcomed me home.